Let's create a couple simple hovers in control. I'm calling them simple hovers because there are many other ways to create more complex hovers, which we'll be covering later in our interaction tutorial. But for now, let's see how we can create hovers. First, I'll create a color hover for a label. And to do that, we can select a label, like this one. We hit plus sign right here, and we call our interaction. In control, all hovers are created through interactions. So we can call it, for example, color hover label. And once we do that, we instantly been transferred into a hovered state right now. If you see in this panel, there is a default and hovered state. So what we have to do, we have to select what activates this interaction. And in our trigger, in our case, it will be hover in, and this interaction will go back to default state by hover out. And while we in a second tab, in a second state, we can change the color of our hover. So for example, we can switch this to be like, I don't know, blue. That's it. You can preview your hover by switching between states. And you can click here to exit the hover editing menu, just like that. Now let's create a color change button here. So in this case, we want all of this area to be hoverable, active, but we also want this background of this button to change color, as well as this label to change color. To do that, we select both layers and hit Command G to group. Let's call it button color. And then the same way we did it before, we just hit plus, we create an interaction, we'll call it button color, and switch trigger to hover in, hover out, and adjust the second state. So for example, in our case, we want the background of the button be switched to, let's say, yellow, and the label color we can switch to, I don't know, this kind of orangey kerosene red. Let's preview. It works. We can also put delays in our hovers and a lot of other features, but I'll cover them later in a more advanced tutorial. So let's go out of this mode, and we have our hover. Just note that if you hover in editor, the hover will not be previewable in editor, but you can also always go to the interactions settings and preview it like this. When you'll be previewing it on your live website, it will of course be triggered by hover. So then let's move on to the next one. Here I want to create like a fill change cover. I want to change this stroke to be a fill on hover. So it's a little bit, tiny bit more complex than the one we just created. So again, let's create a group. Let's call this group, I don't know, fill, like, I don't know, stroke to fill. Let's create plus, create interaction. I'm just giving those names for the sake of demonstration. You can give random names, or you don't even have to rename the groups. Then hover in, hover out, and then we go here, we select this button, and we see that it has a stroke, right? So we can remove the stroke, and we can add opacity for our fill. And we can also change the color of the label to be wherever we want it to be, like for example this one. Let's preview it. Boom, it works. Let's close this mode. And the last one, I want to show you a scale on hover. You can actually use any of the text or object features and they all can be hoverable, but in this case let's use a scale. So we don't have to create groups because it's a single element. All we have to do is create interaction. Let's call it a scale hover. Let's create, and all we have to do, select the trigger to hover and adjust your scale settings, just like that. Let's preview it. It scales nicely. Let's get out of this interaction mode, and we're done. Those were simple hovers in Control.